Hey guys, Aaron here. I have another custom knife review and a brief history that I am going to give you guys. This, to start it off, is the custom Emerson Roadhouse. This is probably my favorite Emerson model, next to, of course, a 6 or something like that. But I just got this in, and I've been carrying it for a week or so, and I love it. But I have done some research and put together a brief history for you. So here we go. Hang on one second. Here we go. Sorry, my other computer is making sound. So before we get too far into this particular knife, let's talk a little bit about Emerson knives in general. Emerson Knives is owned and operated by Ernest Emerson or Ernie Emerson, depending on how much, I don't know how polite you are, I guess. And he first started making knives in 1978 when he was training in a particular Filipino martial art. I'm not certain which one, it's not one of my areas of interest, but in that particular martial art, he required a balisong for his training, or a butterfly knife, if you will. And he couldn't at the time afford one. So he milled and drilled a set of handles out of aluminum, and the knife blade he ground or shaped with files, and then he heat treated it with a butane torch at his kitchen table, and took it to his class. When Emerson started his training in this particular martial art, his students and instructors were impressed by that particular knife that he had made and started requesting that he make them some knives. To start, Ernie was only charging the cost of materials, so he would charge just what the steel and aluminum and the screws and stuff like that cost him. And but eventually, the demand got too great, so he began to charge more. He made a little bit of profit. I think it said in the research that I did that he was charging like $50 for a balisong. I'll bet you a original Ernie Emerson balisong is worth a little bit more than 50 now. But as his demand grew, he eventually transitioned into making fixed blades on a part-time basis. I would guess that he switched to fixed blades just because he was able to make more of them quicker. And he kept doing that until he attended a gun and knife show where he met Michael Walker. Michael Walker was the originator of the Walker liner lock. And from that point on, Ernie began making knives that were liner locks with Walker's blessing. Knives from this era are what a lot of Emerson collectors call pre-tacticals, if you will. And these were very gentlemanly folders, almost kind of bridging on art knives. Ernie would maintain that all of his knives were meant to be used as fighting knives, but the pre-tacs were very dressy. He would use exotic materials available to him in the aerospace industry. He was working for Hughes Aircrafts in El Segundo, California at the time. Particularly carbon fiber, micarta, which he still uses a lot of today, and titanium. And he would use those materials in combination with classic materials knife makers have been using for a long time. Mother of pearl, abalone, bone, stuff like that. And this leads us into where Ernie really came into his own. He had trained. His primary interest was in martial arts and training as a warrior and a fighter. And while observing some of his fellow martial artists training with fixed blades, but carrying folders when they left the studio, he saw a need for a robust fighting folder that could accompany everyone anywhere. So he stripped down 5 of his previous designs and used simpler, more durable materials, such as micarta and titanium, mostly because of how grippy they are when wet and their durability and tensile strength. And this was born the Viper line. After in 1990, a group of Navy SEALs approached a friend of Ernie's, Phil Hartsfeld, a knife maker famous for the Zero Chisel, which you'll see on this knife here, and asked them to see about having a series of folding knives made that featured this blade grind. And Phil informed them that he did not make folders, but referred them to Ernie instead. And Ernie at the time had been using Phil's zero grind chisel with permission for a while. The prototypes that Emerson made for those Navy SEALs are called Viper 6s, later to be renamed the CQC-6. And in the world of special operations and special forces soldiers, a CQC-6 by Ernie became a bit of a status symbol. And as a result, they were branded spec-worn knives. Next came the CQC-7, which was very similar to a 6, just with a little bit different style of a handle. The 8, the 9, so on and so forth. Each with a different practical concept, but brilliant in their own design. Ernie was adamant about ergonomics, functionality of the knife, and its use as a tool or a weapon. As a soldier and a warrior himself, he wanted his knives to be functional, not just something to look at. Mr. Emerson was not the first knife maker to make a tactical folder. I don't know if I would even say that this gentleman was the first to make a tactical folder, but they were both pioneers in the industry. Ernie, that is, was one of the primary makers, rather, that popularized the concept and culture that surrounds custom knives today. And since then, his knives have appeared in popular fiction, movies, television, and in many theaters of combat around the world. They have also lined the pockets of knife enthusiasts everywhere. So that's very brief and just based on my research online. I'm sure some of the details are a little different, but as a hobbyist, I figure that's pretty good if you want to know some stuff about Emerson knives. Ernie went on later to found EKI, or Emerson Knives Incorporated, which makes all of their production knives that are available online. But let's get on to this knife. This is the custom Roadhouse. This knife, as far as I can tell, comes in 4 sizes. The mini, which is about 1/4 of an inch smaller than this. The regular, this one. A super, which is a 4-inch blade, and a beast, which I believe is just a custom offering and has got, I don't actually know the dimensions on it, but is even bigger. I've had a super before, and it was huge, so the beast has to be absolutely ridiculous. The specs on this knife are a 3 3/4 inch blade with an overall length of 9 inches. The weight is 6.2 ounces, and that's with my lanyard and everything, so give or take maybe an ounce. One of the most attractive features for me in this particular knife is Ernie's zero chisel grind. So a zero chisel means that it's only ground on one side and there's no final bevel, so it's ground all the way to the edge. I've owned a number of Emerson knives at this point that have featured the zero chisel, and I'll be honest with you and say that I had heard a lot of people talking about the zero chisel and how sharp it was and how incredible it was, and I liked the way that it looked, but I was not a believer in its level of sharpness. But what I found is that I had been stropping like this. So I had been stropping with the grind down, but the actual technique and what I found online is you actually strop the flat back of the knife just at a very slight angle. And if you caught the video that I posted a couple of nights ago of a paper cut, you'll see that this knife here got pretty sharp. Let's see. The blade is 154 cm, not CPM 154, but 154 cm, a pretty common steel used in a lot of production knives. Even in a custom knife, that's just what Ernie uses and what he likes. He has done that for a long time. Back in like the Viper series knives and stuff like that, he was using ATS 34, which was a precursor to 154 cm. It works. Realistically, it'll do what you want. It may not satisfy all of the steel snobs out there, but I don't think that's really that big of an issue, honestly. If you maintain your blades, it shouldn't be a big deal. This is the zero grind, like I said. If you look at his production knives, they are typically going to be V ground or chisel ground, but they will have a final bevel. On the V ground knives, it's asymmetric. So what I mean by that is that on a V ground knife, instead of having a final bevel on either side, just on one side, typically the left side of the blade, has the final bevel, and this just grinds all the way down. And that just means you just sharpen one side and strop one side. It makes it easier to maintain. Roadhouse ergos for me are perfect. I love this front guard formed by the bolster or the choil. The wave opening feature here creates this really successful and useful thumb ramp, and kind of the slight decline at the butt end of the handle just locks your grip in. It is also equally comfortable in reverse grip. Like I said, Ernie designed his knives for fighting. As far as deployment goes, you have two methods of deployment. The first is the thumb disc, opens a lot like a thumb stud, and the second is the wave feature. The wave feature is this hook here, and if you're familiar with Emerson knives, you know what this does, but when this is in your pocket, you draw it out and back along the seam of your pants, and it will open the knife as you draw. It's the fastest method to open a knife that I have ever encountered. Faster than an auto, faster than a flipper, faster than a thumb stud, because by the time the knife is out of your pocket, it's open and ready to go. The usefulness as a fighting knife should be apparent, but it's also just really cool. So yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I mean, this is one of my favorite Emerson models. I've had an 8, I have a Mini Commander, I've had a couple other models, I've had a 13, I've had a Journeyman Custom, and I've even had a Mini Roadhouse, and I like the full size the most. What I enjoy about having a custom Emerson, they are expensive, but I like carrying a knife that has a place in the heritage of the tactical folding knife community. I'm not a heavy user, I'm not a fighter, I don't sharpen my knives on sidewalks and use them as self-defense tools. But if you're involved in this community and interested in what helped push it to where it is now, you can't ignore Mr. Emerson's contributions. And having something made by him is really neat. So I think you guys would all do well to pick up an Emerson knife. Whether it be a custom that you can find on one of the forums or scored on one of the lotteries at Blade Show or The Gathering, or if you just want a production. I'm going to put a link in the description to Blade HQ's Production Emerson page, and you can look through it and pick what you like. I recommend the Production Roadhouse. So I hope you guys like it. If you do choose to purchase something from Blade HQ, you will be helping to support my channel, and I will greatly appreciate it. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. I've enjoyed doing these more researched, kind of more thorough, long style reviews, and I hope you do as well. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments. Aaron out of here.